It is time for us to dip down real low to dunk on somebody who I haven't talked about in quite some time. You guys actually are going to be surprised by who I'm going to be dunking on today. We're going to be dunking on Jimmy Dore. Yeah, didn't expect that, did you? Well, I'm starting to notice this really worrying rise in this, like, blend of Nazgul and tanky ideology that's starting to get really popular on the left, right? This, it's sort of like, for example, right now, the largest self-proclaimed left-leaning figure on Twitter is Jackson Hinkle, who is, of course, himself, he calls himself a MAGA communist, and he is also a pretty open tanky. This type of leftism is, like, getting really popular on the Twitter sphere due to how it very much rewards bigotry, but there's also this sort of, like, young people, populist, anti-capitalist trend that even the right kind of has to play into to some extent in order to bring over Zoomers to the degree that they want to. Like, even your average chud right-winger has to basically molest socialist talking points into something relatively similar to what the left says in order to actually get young people on board with what they believe, right? Hell, the strategy from the right for a lot of Gamergate was to claim that the roles had switched and the right were actually the hip, young, cool, libertarian ones, and the liberals had become like the authoritarian, prudish, they want to ban video games and make it a crime to have free speech types, right? They basically tried to convince young people that the right is the hip and cool group now. While Jimmy Dore probably doesn't have a lot of pull with young people, and I mean, his videos don't do all that well for a channel as big as he is. He's got 1.27 million subs, and this video is 10 days old with 81,000 views. Like, I've got videos from weeks ago and, like, months ago with that many views, and I'm literally fractionally the size of this guy. So he's not really anywhere as big as he used to be, but he's still big enough that apparently he has a live show calendar at the start of his segments, and that's too damn big in my opinion. He also titled this video, "The Left's Identity Politics is Killing the Working Class." So this is no doubt going to be centered around the idea that, like, the left discussing social issues having to do with, like, marginalized groups and their rights is actually pushing away the centrist working class from supporting the left, and that we need to get rid of talking about these social issues and only talk about economic plights and how we need to instill socialism or whatever. But also, Jimmy Dore is not a socialist because he's, like, the biggest, like, he hoovers up money like a goddamn vacuum. Let's check this out.
Now, let's remember, Cornel West grew up wealthy, and he spent his entire life in ivory tower, Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. He's not a member of the working class. He never was. And
Jimmy Dore, you are streaming from a studio right now. Okay, I'm sorry. We need to put a complete and total shutdown on lefties that unironically do this whole, like, this person's bad because they've always not been working class, or because they're not working, like, dude, this is the most LARPy Twitter socialism I've ever seen, and it's from a graying old man that I don't even know how old he is. He must be in his 70s, right? Older, maybe? 60s at the youngest? Like, this is 13-year-old Twitter leftism is what I'm hearing right now, just right out the gate. Like, teenager Twitter leftism. Pit crew leftism.
I am.
No offense if you have a pit crew in chat, but, like, you know the stereotype of pit crew accounts.
I've been blue-collar my entire life. I was a bricklayer.
You've been blue-collar your entire... Listen, guys, even though I do not make much money, I would not consider myself a blue-collar worker. I just wouldn't. The fact that I don't have to, like, get up in the morning and, like, dread my entire fucking day, go out, like, before the sun's fucking up and get in a car and drive to a fucking commute and, like, you cannot claim you're a blue-collar worker when your job is to sit in front of a camera and talk. We are not blue-collar workers. We exist in a whole new area of economic and social existence. We're contract workers that have very, very fragile incomes and careers as it stands already. And, like, There's never, YouTube hasn't existed long enough for us to even know if it's possible for someone to maintain like a relatively okay income long term. We don't even know if these platforms allow for that. Like, let's say, for example, I maintain 355 viewers consistently forever. I would be able to live off of that, but whether or not it's possible to exist like that without either A, dying entirely or continuing to grow in the long run is literally not known. Like the platform and this medium has not existed long enough to know. You can't claim you're a blue collar worker when you're talking from your studio. You have a literal schedule for live shows. Like, no, dog, no. This is peak champagne socialism.
I did tuck pointing. Then I became a stand-up comedian, which is the most blue-collar thing you could do, entertaining drunks.
What? What? I'm sorry. You may be working class, but you are not blue collar. Blue collar has a very significant association when you say that. You're not waking up and like commuting an hour to work before the sun comes up, or taking a train or public transportation to your job that you fucking hate with a boss that can fire you whenever he feels like it, okay? You are not a blue-collar worker. You are a self-employed contractor with a dream job, as am I, okay? Let's not pretend like we don't have jobs that every single one of our viewers wouldn't kill for. I hate this, like, weird I'm one of you virtue signal that lefty content creators will do. Guys, your jobs and lives are probably harder than mine on average. You guys have much harder. If you're watching me right now, you're probably watching me at work, okay? My job isn't necessarily easy. It's not necessarily a cakewalk. I'm sure if you guys worked it, you would enjoy it in many ways and be upset at it in other ways. But, like, let's not pretend like there aren't some serious perks to what me and Jimmy Dore do that very much separate us from the average experience or the general experience of your average working class person. I really don't like, and I'm not talking about money or income here, I really don't like when these people talk about their job like they have the same experience as a working class American as you do, the viewers. Hassan does this too. Hassan tries to be like, we with his viewers. It's like, dog, you live in a $3 million house in LA. Your viewers are donating $5 a piece to cumulatively create that enormous wealth. You are not one of them, okay? Like, I don't know. Listen, I'm not trying to, like, belittle what you guys do or say, like, shit talk what you guys do. I'm trying to put down this idea that, like, streamers have it so much harder, or, like, content creators have it so hard compared to the average worker. There's tough sides of it. Don't get me wrong. I'll be the first to tell you. But I would take this over what 99% of your jobs are in chat any day. And I'm not going to pretend like otherwise to try to convince you my job's harder than it is. So you guys think, oh, yeah, you're just like one of us. Yeah. Like, you're fighting the good fight, too. Like, I'm fighting much less the good fight than you guys, okay? I know it's not as good to say for my bottom line. Hassan, does his whole, like, I'm part of the proletariat thing, and everybody loves it. But, like, I'm calling out that bullshit. It bothers me. It actually annoys the shit out of me when people like Jimmy Dore do this. And Hassan does it, too. Hassan does it a lot.
In nightclubs and banging my head and sleeping in condos and banging my head against the blue-collar wall for 30 years, right? He didn't do any of that, which is why he gets to then talk about identity.
This guy's no doubt got an insane amount of money. I'm sure he's gone from being on TYT to having over 1 million subs on YouTube. If someone has had 1 million subs if someone has had over 1 million subs on YouTube for a significant amount of time and maintained the equivalent viewership, and is not set for life, they did something really wrong. Like, really, really, really wrong. With less than 100k subs, if it weren't for Lonnie, I would have, like, savings. Like, considerable savings. Like, enough that I could afford to, like, have an emergency. I couldn't now, because the Lonnie thing, but, like, otherwise, I would be. I can't imagine a YouTuber being 10 times my size, views, and income, and not having considerable savings to the point where they can live comfortably for the rest of their lives after a year of that income. Like, I know that Boogie298 was, like, super irresponsible with his wealth or whatever, but, like, I don't know. Like, I can't imagine like just because you choose not to spend your enormous money in a certain way doesn't mean you don't have it, right? Does that make sense? If I became a multimillionaire tomorrow, I wouldn't be partying it up, but that wouldn't change the fact that that would immediately not make me not blue collar. And I guarantee Jimmy Dore's a millionaire. If he's not a millionaire, he is extremely irresponsible with money. If he is old, has worked in this industry for a long time, and on top of that has a YouTube channel with over 1 million subs. There's no way he's not a millionaire. I won't say how much YouTubers make, but I know YouTubers that are millionaires. And I know that you can be much smaller than Jimmy Dore and be a millionaire. Much smaller.
Identity politics ad nauseum. And go ahead, you want to say something?
Yeah. I think it's really important to this is what I make the point about in the book too, is that working class people use their bodies to work. That's how they earn their living.
That's right.
They like drain them.
Okay. Dog. That's absolutely stupid. That's absolutely fucking stupid. Imagine trying to... Okay. There are tons of... Okay. Oh my god. Holy shit. That's so fucking stupid. Do you know how many data entry jobs there are in the US? Blue-collar jobs that are literally just data entry, programming, site, like web construction. Jobs that just require you to have an education and sit at a desk, and yet you're still paid barely above minimum wage. The idea that blue-collar work, working-class work, is physical work is literally immediately, just dropping a substantial portion of the working class out of your advocacy.
Themselves or whatever. I'm descended of long generations of peasants. My uncle, I'm in China right now, was a blue-collar worker his whole life, retired, a factory worker, never made more than a factory worker's wage. And, you know, I've worked every bad job. Can I say shitty on your show?
Sure.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, by the way, the last time we covered this dude was when he got outed for sexually harassing Anna Kasparian. Obviously, we don't like her, but obviously the fact we don't like her changes nothing about that, because he literally would regularly, serially sexually harass Anna Kasparian. He's a creepo, on top of everything else.
Every shitty job in the world that women are allowed to work. And so when you have this experience, like, of sort of how, when you're working these jobs where you're using up your body and your energy, and you look at how people look at you, you understand, like, how low you are on the social totem pole. And the professional manager class, they're the brain workers, they're the knowledge workers, they're like in the information economy. So many things in the world still need physical labor to be done, like longshoremen. We want to automate everything because basically we don't want to have unruly workers. They would automate bricklaying if they could, Jimmy, so that there wouldn't be a person like you. You know what I mean? They would have robots do that, and then you'd have like unemployed, opioid-addicted people who were once working class and who are just unemployed.
Why is it a common trend for right-wing grifters to also be known sex predators? Well, because, like, these people, part of their political ideology is that they do not view particularly women, and also usually children, as people deserving of, like, respect or, like, autonomy, right? They view their children as property of their fathers, and they view women as their own rightful property. They view themselves as having some level of an entitlement to women's bodies and sexuality. This is very common in older men who feel like they can just kind of, like, use their age as an out, like, there's got to be women in my chat who have had the experience where, like, old dudes will be creepy and think they can use their being old to try to get out of it, right? Like, to try to, like, socially diffuse the being creepy. It's crossing into that territory, Eliza Lee, but I can't say much more. That's all that... I can't say much more. It's not my story to tell. Anyway.
But these knowledge workers, people who only, like, use their minds for a living, they really think that being smarter makes them better than everyone else. And I'm just like, no, it does not. And your smarts is a very, like, narrow form of smarts. Like, you know, I don't know how to solve this problem. I just feel like we have to
identify it
be
first.
Combative.
Yes, so I'm going to be combative with Cornel West right here, okay. And so this all comes down. By the way, so all this trans issues and gender identity and all that is not coming from the grassroots. That is not coming from the bottom up. That is coming from the top down. That is coming from BlackRock. That is coming from Vanguard. That is called DEI. And the diversity, equity,
inclusion?
and
Okay, so he's going to try to claim that diversity, equity, and inclusion hiring is somehow pro-American imperialism and woke, and that's bad? Okay, so here's my position on affirmative action. I don't think affirmative action on its own is necessarily good, because as we have it now, it's had some pretty negative outcomes. Notably, there's been some already arguably privileged groups that have benefited from it more disproportionately. Notably, white women from relatively decent upbringings have gotten surprisingly, like, you could argue, sort of exploitative privilege out of these things, when, like, white women are not the group necessarily that's been the most disenfranchised by any means. Like, they are some of the most privileged below white men, right? So it's a little bit of a worry when that's the concern. And so on top of that, affirmative action can also, kind of exclude a lot of people who are not people of color who still suffer from the same economic strife. So I think the best way to handle affirmative action as a Band-Aid, because it's not itself a solution to the problem, because it's very, like, the fact that kids can't qualify for college being a problem is itself a problem in the first place. There needs to be higher education available for literally every kid who wants access to it. Good higher education, reputable higher education. The problem is most affirmative action does not really account for upbringing and where you're coming from, right? I think that affirmative action should mostly be centered less so on race, gender, those factors, and more so on how much does this kid need affirmative action? Like, how much are they clearly trying, but everything from where they come from is getting in their way, and if it weren't for those things, they would probably be qualifying, right? Income is probably the best thing to look at. Generational income, primarily. Because you may have, say, a parent who wins the lottery and sends their kid to school, but, like, they don't really know how to balance a checkbook, and they don't know how to teach their kid how to balance a checkbook, or to, like, do basic, like, financial things such as saving and investing in your retirement, and hell, just investing in basic safe stocks like the S&P 500. I mean, if you invested in the S&P 500 like back during the financial crash, which I did, I just haven't like even looked or checked on it. Apparently, it did pretty well. I invested like $50, and I think it might be like impressively higher now if I were to check on it. But yeah, like if you don't have that knowledge on how to like really invest and really build generational wealth, that's going to affect your kids and your kids' kids. White women aren't taking on affirmative action. They just have better grades, statistically speaking, in high school and look to get degrees at universities over their white male peers. I will say, Liameth, you've already demonstrated yourself wrong about one thing in chat today, so I don't know if I'm too keen to immediately agree with you when I've seen data that says otherwise. However, I still maintain, regardless of whether or not that's true, that a income-based affirmative action would be ideal. Because an income-based, and also we have to acknowledge the issue of college admissions have been shown to be racially biased as well. So there's also that. That's also an issue of its own that's trying to be, like, dealt with. But yeah, regardless, these problems also exist in the workforce, not just college. I use college as an example, and other positions too, like the military. So, that just kind of covering all bases.
Inclusion. And what's that there to do? That's there to put a shield of virtue around the companies that are raping the planet and crushing workers. So they can say, look, we've got gay people, we've got trans people crushing workers.
It helps pharmaceuticals too.
We've got we've got black people and brown people, and we've got women. We've got all these people doing all the horrible things, but they're now getting a good salary for doing it. And doesn't that make us virtuous? And Cornel West could not stop using that language, could not stop talking about trans issues, could not stop talking about gender.
Okay. Essentially what he's going to try to do right now is claim that caring about LGBT stuff and like minority rights and whatnot is being used by liberal establishment Dems to distract from the real issues. I cannot tell you how much I despise people like this. These are the people who, despite all the policies we went over in the segment before, will still tell you not to vote for Biden in 2024.
white supremacy, calling his political opponents fascist, which comes right from BlackRock and Vanguard and the Democrat.
What? Calling your political opponents fascist comes from BlackRock and Vanguard? I'm pretty sure calling your political opponents fascists comes from anti-fascists.
Democratic elite establishment, the billionaire class that runs the whole world. And here I am trying to impress upon him, and I'd like to get your reaction to it. So let me just say this. So the point of running a third-party campaign is to offer an alternative to the two major parties, to bring together disaffected members of those parties, along with independents and others who feel alienated from the political system as it exists. And the best way to do this is by running on economic issues.
Is he playing a clip of himself while doing an interview?
That unite us, but which neither major party is willing to address because they're both beholden to the same powerful corporate interests. The Democratic Party long ago abandoned the working class in favor of beating the drum on cultural issues, and now that's all the Democrats have to run on.
Okay, so the fact is that the Democrats, policy-wise, and at least electorally, are more popular on pretty much everything other than, in certain regions, guns. So if you take a proportion of Americans, most Americans are probably relatively in favor, I wouldn't say in favor, but at least relatively in favor of some level of gun policy. The problem is when you consider the fact that rural voters have a lot of power due to the fact that they can make up a larger percentage of the population in some states, despite the fact that there are cities. Some states have like ridiculous farmer populations and just rural populations generally, and these rural populations can vote pretty red depending on where you are. Despite that fact, you've still got a lot of voters out there who, while they aren't necessarily a majority, they're still a electorally significant population worth trying to win over. And one of the only culture issues the left really loses on with those people, really, I think, is guns. Besides that, even among like groups that aren't super pro-trans, the anti-trans, just the yum-yucking and the virtue signaling and the moral panics these people do, it's just unappealing. It doesn't drive people to the polls. We saw how the midterms went. Even when the like polling shows that the Democrats don't have that strong of a chance of winning, when you actually see the election roll out, we get landslide Democrat wins. That's what happened in the midterms across most of the states that were like big battleground states, because these trans attack ads don't work. They don't work. The left wins on these culture issues. They just do. And it's what the left needs to focus on, because these are its strong points. Issues such as gay marriage, abortion, women's rights, like police reform. These are winning issues for the left. They just are. Anyone claiming otherwise has ulterior motives to lie about this, because he's just lying. I'm going to speed this video up because like we need more lives per minute here. We need more lives per minute. This video is so short, but I've already made it so long.
So if voters are looking for a party running on trans rights and calling Donald Trump and his supporters white supremacists, they can already vote for Democrats. The role of a third party is to focus not on the identity politics that divide us, but on core economic issues that unite us along class lines, like Christian Smalls did at Staten Island. Do you think he led with LGBTQ trans rights and white supremacy, or do you think he organized along class lines? That's what we have to do. You have to organize, meet people where they are. So what is your plan to organize along class lines, or are you going to keep talking about white supremacy and all those identity politics, which are there, not from the ground up, from the top down, to make sure we stay divided? What is your plan to organize along class lines?
Well, I appreciate again the clarity and candor of what you have to say. We have profound disagreements, brother. When I organize around white supremacy, I'm not making some utilitarian calculation. I'm speaking as a black man who comes out of a tradition that's been terrorized.
Dude, I love this visual of Jimmy Dore doing the smug DreamWorks face and like shaking his head as he explains, as a black man, I feel a motivation to speak out against white supremacy. What the fuck? What a fucking visual. Does he not realize how ironic that is for this like old white man to do a smug smile and shake his head at like a black man explaining why he feels the need to speak out against white supremacy. Also, Colonel West is a grifter. I don't like Colonel West, but like, I still think this is just the most hilarious visual I've ever seen. Like, you can't even lie and say this is not parody. He's so condescending. Where did he get the idea it was cool to be this smug? I mean, I guess he has an audience. There's an audience for it.
When I organize around white supremacy, I'm not making some utilitarian calculation. I'm speaking as a black man who comes out of a tradition that's been terrorized and traumatized by white elites. And that does not in any way mean it takes me away from class issues. Class issues are crucial. Class issues are fundamental. But it doesn't mean that I'm putting up with white supremacy. One of the problems is that you get too many folk who want to talk class, and can't say a mumbling word about white supremacy, police brutality, can't say a mumbling word hardly. Or when they do.
So that was basically his response. And it was super disappointing. And even when I tried to point out to him, he didn't care about what happened to people during COVID and lockdowns and how it was a controlled demolition of our economy that benefited a handful of millionaires and billionaires and crushed everybody else. And I tried to point that out to him because he didn't care about COVID. He didn't care about that. He didn't care that 70,000 workers got fired in one state alone. Healthcare workers got.
So basically, this is the weird Nazbol pro-worker bullshit that I think Shuanhead did this too. For those that don't know, the ulterior motive is Shu's an anti-vaxxer in regards to COVID, at least. I don't know about other vaccines, but in regards to COVID, Shu is an anti-vaxxer. She is fully unvaxxed and does not believe the vaccine is something that people should take. However, people like Jimmy Dore also believe this. And what they say, they basically argue this in the most extrapolated way they possibly can. Essentially what they argue is that it is authoritarian and bad to force vaccine mandates for particularly even healthcare workers. So like, let's say you're a doctor and your hospital says, wait, you refuse to get the COVID vaccine and boosters? You're a danger to your like patients and the other doctors. Like you're going to be fired if you don't get it. Like that was essentially the idea that was being tossed around, and many doctors were fired for this. And people like Shu and Jimmy Dore and other like hyper like anti-authoritarian types were like, no, that's anti-worker. That's anti-worker. This is lib shit, because they're workers getting fired from their jobs. But the reason they're getting fired from their jobs is they refuse to get a vaccine or wear a mask, and they want to be disease spreaders. They could literally keep their job if they got vaccinated or wore a mask, and they refuse. And the healthcare workers that refuse, they still make excuses for. These people genuinely do not give a fuck about you. Are driver's license authoritarian then? They are not. And you could make the same argument to gun people, and they'll say, actually, yeah, driver's licenses are authoritarian, and it's insane.
Got fired in one state alone because they wouldn't go along with a mandate from Big Pharma to enrich them. And here's what he said. Here's why we did. Black business owners collapsed by 41%. Black business because of lockdowns. Do you care yet? 70,000 workers in one state were fired because of vaccine mandates. When are you going to care? Do they all have to be trans? When are you going to care about these workers? What are you going to care about? What are you going to care about this? So anyway, I would just like to get your response to that. It was a very frustrating interview for me because I thought if there was ever a time for a third-party candidate to make a headway in this country, it's now. And he's on purpose throwing it away by incorporating the professional managerial class language and lexicon into his campaign, which is there to divide people and keep us from coming together along class lines. And luckily I'm not as dumb as a Harvard professor that I can see through that. Too bad he's not. What do you have to say?
Well, you know what? I think that, what I long for is someone who will speak to like universal issues of human dignity and actually crunch the numbers. If there are 25% of people who have college degrees, and of those 25, like half, like maybe 13% are part of the PMC elites, then you have the majority of Americans who don't go to college, who are going to work non-professional jobs, and whose lives are real.
Okay, college participation among Gen Z is already dropping. There's no, like, this is voluntary participation in college among Gen Z is dropping massively. There's no, like, there's less competition for college per capita of people than ever now, is there not? I may be wrong on this, so correct me if I'm not. But, like, there's, like, record low rates of young people pursuing higher education right now, right? I think it might be up for women, but it's still kind of like flatlining a little bit for them. but it's like that they're rising from a pretty low spot prior, the whole historical thing of all that. But yeah, like just across the board, we're seeing much lower. Yeah. After finals week, I've stopped judging dropouts. Well, no, I mean, like, I'm talking about statistically. I'm pretty sure I've seen actual data. And if you guys want to, like, quick Google this up for me to confirm this, because I don't want to spread lefty misinfo, I'm pretty sure we're seeing voluntary record low per capita higher education participation from young people right now, from, like, college or high school graduates. I had to drop out for financial reasons. That's probably a big part of it, to be fair. I hate this idea that, like, rich... Like they're basically trying to claim that, like, rich black people are profiting off of, like, affirmative action and stealing spots from these poor white people. And I don't mean, like, poor as in, oh, poor white people. As in, like, poor, like, don't have money white people. And it's like... This has never been demonstrated to be as significant of a problem as any of these people make it out to be. Is it worth maybe amending the way that we handle affirmative action programs? Sure. Is it worth axing the concept entirely? I don't think so. I don't think just saying, nah, fuck people who've had worse off upbringings. That's not good. And I don't even think we're going to see advocacy for, like, income-based affirmative action here, are we? These people claim to be, like, focused on the economic side, the sort of worker and owner side of discussions around politics, the theory side of things, the discussions around the working class and the capitalist ruling class. Why is there no discussion around how we can fix these social problems with economic solutions? Why is there no discussion around how supposedly socialism or socialist reforms would solve these problems? They don't even bother because they know their audience. They know their audience doesn't give a fuck. An absolute fuck. Does this get interesting at any point?
Like working 90 hours supremacy, like gives white people this get out of jail free card. Why are the largest numbers of poor people in America white? What's wrong with them? Like, can't they just go?
Because white people are most Americans. I'm sorry. You know for a fact if you look at statistics and you look at per capita numbers, you know for a fact. While most poor people are white, most white people aren't poor. That's the big difference between white people and a lot of other racial demographics and their social and economic status currently on average in this country. Most people in the U.S. are white, so no shit, most poor people in the U.S. are white. But if you look at, say, American black people, most American black people are poor. That is not true of white people. And yes, there is less poor black people than poor white people in total. Clearly, one group is having a much bigger problem with poverty than the other group. Now, this doesn't mean we shouldn't solve poverty for everybody, but if you're going to try to racialize the issue, let's not pretend like one group isn't clearly getting it worse than the other by only looking at sheer numbers when the numbers are as heavily weighed as they are. Yeah, I don't know. This shit is actually, like, incomprehensible. Like, I think my brain is... I'm getting dumber for having listened to this video.
And I could be demonized just for coming on your show. I don't really give a shit anymore. But
no one knows who
what happens is, like, you can't morality play and somehow repeating Romania all over the world, renovating it and then pumping up the rent like 3 times. The giant hedge funds, they have way too much money, and politicians have let that happen. So if someone's not talking...
This shit's all about getting conservatives on board with socialism by convincing them you can be, like, in favor of pro-worker stuff, which is pretty appealing to, like, a lot of, working class people, obviously, without having to be anti-racist or, like, anti-gay or anti-trans, right? They're basically trying to sell socialism and communism to bigots by saying, yo, I know most people who are socialist or communist and care about workers' rights also care about the rights of minorities, but you don't have to care about the rights of minorities and be pro-worker. We can fight for the white, straight, heterosexual working class. We got to get that social commentary out of there. We got to get rid of the message. Just absolutely shoving the boot as far down your throat as you possibly can. It's hard to even call this left-leaning politics anymore. It's really just right-wing politics disguised as left-wing politics. Nazis, pretty much. This might actually be unironic National Socialism. He might be slowly moving towards the ideology of National Socialism. Doorstepping, it's called. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. I like that. He might just straight up be becoming an unironic through and through Nazi. I can't argue against that theory that I made up myself right now, and no one else is arguing against it. I don't know. I really hate this populist bullshit. I thought the Nazgul Vortex was as big and bad as it was going to be back during the Bernie or Bust movement, but apparently it's going to get worse, because I see some startling things in the horizon when you consider the popularity of Hassan and just the fact that he's been very well normalized and his politics are getting closer to that of Jimmy Dore's by the day. I don't know. I'll leave it up to you guys to decide. I'm curious to see the comments on this one.